Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about deploying Symfony applications. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about. I started talking about this topic many years ago when I think no one was thinking about it. I always enjoy this, so I'm really happy to share all of this with you. I'm also really happy to be in Barcelona. I love this city. The architecture is amazing. The food is amazing. The only problem is when I go back home, I go back with several kilos extras. But I guess it's a good problem to have, right? And I want to thank the organizers for putting this event. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of responsibility to do this. So thank you very much. It's great for the community. So let's dive into the topic, deployment. What is deployment? If we go to the Wikipedia page, it includes a pretty good overview of what it's involved to make a software available for use for our customers or our users. So after the talk, not now, you can go to this page and read over. There's some really good information there. And it's kind of generic for software, for applications, but it's really useful. So I always like to think that deployment is a critical part of the application lifecycle. Many people don't think about deployment until the late stages of the application. But it's very important to start thinking about it early on, and we will see why. So it should not be an afterthought. It should be something that you start planning early on. It's also boring, okay? It's very boring. This talk is going to be one of the most boring ones in the conference. There's no Symfony code. But there's people that make lists of things. When they go to the supermarket, they make a list of things to buy. When they go on vacation, they make a list of things to visit. And there's even people that make lists of things to do on a boring day, and deployment is probably in that list. Your son or your daughter gets really bored when you're doing it. Whole development teams fall asleep waiting for the deployment process to finish. Even Bart Simpson thinks it's boring. And Donald Trump, you can think of this guy many things, but boring is not one of them. And even he thinks this is boring. So also baseball, for me, is a really boring game. I went one time in the US to a game, and I had to leave in the middle. I couldn't watch the entire game. But some people really think this is a very exciting sport. So boring is relative, right? Some people think soccer or football is boring. And Barcelona here, you love football. So this is very relative. But why is it boring? Most of us here are software developers. We like to write code. We like to create things from nothing into something awesome. And deployment really doesn't involve much of that. It's also very repetitive. You usually have to copy some files to a server, set up parameters, build assets like JavaScript and CSS files, run migrations. If you have a database, you need to make changes to a database, maybe restart a web server. And you're going to be doing this over and over again, indefinitely. Every time there's a new version, you're going to do it all the time. And developers are not musicians. Think about it, musicians, they go on a tour, they have concerts, let's say, every night, and they play the same songs over and over again. And I think it could be really boring. I don't know, but there is a good analogy here that when they go into a concert and they play the entire 2 hours with no mistakes, there's a reason why. And the reason is because they've been practicing for days, weeks, months, years in order to achieve that perfection. And the analogy here is also that for us, for having a good deployment process, we need to practice. We need to do this as often as we can, trying to reach that perfection. Because when you reach that perfection, then you forget about the deployment process. You forget about the details. You don't have to think about it. Imagine when you are deploying a new version with a lot of features under a pretty tight deadline, and the last thing you want to do is thinking about the deployment process. The same thing if you discover a critical bug in the application and you need to fix it, you don't want to be thinking about this. Anyhow, anyone know this band? I give you 10 euros if you guess it. First one. Where? There. Okay. Get me afterwards. I thought it was going to be more difficult. So if it's repetitive, it means that we can automate this thing. And this is the whole idea of this talk. You can learn something here and there, but when you leave here, think about automation. This is the key. This is the most important thing. We have a lot of examples in the world about automation and how it's making things better. Before, cars used to be built by hundreds or thousands of people, and now we have an army of robots building Teslas. It's amazing. But this automation makes everything more efficient. It creates less problems in the cars, etc. So this is really good. Also, autonomous cars, they are coming much faster than you think. And every year, there's millions of people that die in car crashes. And autonomous cars are going to help us reduce those fatalities. If you took an airplane to come to Barcelona, the time that airplane was driven by a pilot is very little. Most of the time, the airplanes are in autopilot. So again, another example. So there is a lot of benefits for automation. In our case, for deployment, it means that it's going to be easy to launch. You automate your process, and then you run one script or one command, and the whole process gets started. You can also click a link in Jenkins, for example. Or you can hook it to your testing phase, so whenever it finishes, the deployment is automatically started. It gives you consistent results, which means that when you start the process and the process finishes, you know you have a new version of your site or your application live for your users. And if something fails in the middle, then you know that the live site it was not affected. You get a nice error message explaining what happened. Then you go and fix it, and you try again. But the most important thing is that your live site was not affected. It also allows you to do rollbacks. Let's say you deploy a new version of the site, and then someone finds a critical bug in it. You don't have time to figure out what's going on. You go back to the previous version that you know it was running fine. So rollbacks are a really important part of it. And it also provides you a scalable and secure way of doing things. What it means is that you may start with one server, and then your site grows in users or traffic, then you add more servers. The process allows you to add servers without really changing much. The same thing if the application evolves in complexity, you start adding Elasticsearch or something else, then automating this will allow you to scale. It also means that you get a documented procedure that everybody can go and look what's happening. And you get a new developer, a new member in the team. He's going to be able to deploy quickly because the process is already defined. And everyone is going to be doing the same thing. It doesn't matter how long they've been in the company. They will be able to do it. And this is very important because in large organizations, it's good to give your developers the ability to deploy their features. You don't want to be dependent on one person or on one team to do the deployment. And the most important thing of all, there is no human intervention, or very little, okay, if you need to start the process. But this point is very, very important, because humans, we are masters of messing up. Don't ask me how this car ended up here, but we mess up on land, we mess up on water. This guy, he was doing a race around the world, and they ran into a shallow area. They were looking at their screen, the GPS, and they didn't notice there was a place where they shouldn't go, and they ran into it. And we also mess up on land, on air. As developers, we also mess up. And many will tell you that if you didn't drop a database in production, you have not been long enough in your job. I've done it, okay? It's not fun. I guarantee you that. And running this command in production is not fun. I see this command, and it gives me the chills. We have a say in Argentina. I come from Argentina. We have a say. Te quemás con leche, ves una vaca y llorás. You burn with milk, you see a cow, and you cry. I see this command, and I cry, because this happened to me too. So these are great examples of what human intervention means, and usually means really nasty things. So you want to avoid that. And the simplest way to automate a deployment process would be to, every time we push some code to Git, like GitHub or any other source control repository, we configure this repository so it issues a hook, calls a hook to load a script on our server, and that script is going to do a Git pull. So every time we push something new, the server is going to request that change. And in PHP, this is very easily done. In the PHP script, you execute git pull, and then you set up in GitHub, you set up the hook, and then this is very easy. You push changes, you get the changes in the server rapidly. If you're doing Symfony, you can run composer install, you can clear the cache, you can do any other operations that you want to do. But what happens when git pull or composer is running, or the cache is running, clear the cache is running? The application is going to be in a weird state. You're going to have old files with new files. You're going to have old dependencies with new dependencies. The templates, the cache templates in Symfony are going to be all over the place. So if a user gets into that site at this point, the most probably outcome is going to be an error. And you want to avoid that. So this works really well for small sites. I use it on some small sites. I don't care if someone gets an error. But on a decent application, you shouldn't be doing that. You need to avoid insecure and inconsistent methods of updating your site. Using FTP, please don't. SCP, a little better, rsync, git pull. These things by themselves are not good ways of updating our application. We need to reach consistency. And we create consistency by putting each release, each new version of our application into a directory in a releases directory, for example. So we have directories with a timestamp. In this case, I have date, but you can add the time. And then you create a symbolic link that points to the proper version of your application. You may need to store shared files like logs or upload files from the site. So you put those on a separate place, and then you create links from the new release into these shared directories. And then if you need to change the version, you just change the current symlink. You change it to the previous version. This is how we create consistency. So far, we haven't touched Symfony at all. But deploying Symfony is not rocket science, really. The most important thing that you need to keep in mind is automate and avoid human intervention. The Symfony documentation has several pages about deployment. There's one that lists different deployment strategies for different hosting providers. There's some good information there. And then there's one page about deployment that talks about using FTP to upload the files. So that one, don't follow. But basically, what we need to do is we need to upload or install the code in servers. We need to install the dependencies with Composer. If you have a database and you need to make changes, you run migrations with Doctrine or any other method that you choose. You install or build the assets like JavaScript, CSS files. You need to probably minify those. Then you need to clear or warm up the cache. And maybe you need to reload the server to clear APC, or reload queues if you have those, or perform any other operations that you do after the deployment. So these are the basic steps, no matter what tool you're going to use to deploy. It's really not that difficult. If we translate this into commands, we would do git clone, git pull, git checkout, something like that. Then we run Composer. We run Doctrine migrations if we have to. We install the assets into the web directory. If we are using Ascetic, which I don't know how many people still use, but you run Ascetic or you run Gulp, whatever you're using to generate your assets. And then you clear the cache. These are the basic commands to deploy an application. And obviously, I mean, we can put all of this into a bash script, and we would kind of automate the process. But the thing is, when you do that, you're creating something custom internally to your organization. And this is not ideal. You want to use tools that are industry standard, that people have been using for a while, that there's good documentation, good maintenance, etc. So try to avoid having custom things in your team. There's a couple really good PHP tools to do deployment. One is deployer.org. Another one is Magallanes, which is created by a developer here in Spain. I don't know if he's here. Nope. These are really good tools. Check them out if you want. There's also Fabric, which is a Python-based tool, and it's been around for a while. Some people use it with great success, but you need to define the deployment process in Python syntax. So, I mean, if you've been doing PHP for a while, it's going to feel a little bit weird. Then we have Capistrano, which is one of the most popular ones. This is a Ruby tool. You need to define the configuration in Ruby. And there's a plugin called Capifony, which I use for many years, that allows you to define a set of variables to deploy a Symfony application, and then it uses Capistrano to perform all the actions. And this worked really well until they decided to build Capistrano 3, the last version, and everything was broken. I mean, it's not backwards compatible, so when you install Capifony, you need to make sure you have Capistrano 2, etc. I mean, it's a mess. So for the last few years, I've been using Ansible, and I have really good success with Ansible. What do you use? Ah, okay, good. I thought you were booing. Yeah, Ansible is a great tool to not just deploy applications, but to manage your entire infrastructure. You can manage your servers, the packages in your servers. And everything is really simple to define because you use simple YAML files to define your tasks, and then you define your servers in text files. So it's really easy to get started. You don't have to spend a lot of time learning about it. And then it's easy to configure, maintain, and grow with it. It's also very flexible. You can, it comes with a bunch of core modules, but you can add custom modules. You can add plugins to do more things. And then you have the notion of roles, which is a set of tasks that you can reuse on different projects. And we're going to talk about roles later. It's also agentless, and some people don't like this, but I think it's pretty cool. You don't need to install anything special on the server that you want to manage. You just connect through SSH, and that's it. And it has really good integration with different hosting providers, cloud providers, and containers. So you can manage Docker with Ansible very easily. So this is a little bit of a diagram of what Ansible is. You have the core of the system. Then you have some core modules that come with it. You can have more custom modules, plugins. And then you define your servers in the host inventory file. And then the playbooks are the list of tasks or commands that you're going to be performing in your servers. So you define your servers in an inventory file, which looks like this. It's just a list of servers or hosts. And you can group them in different groups. So you can have web servers, database servers, queue servers, whatever. And you can define multiple servers in one line with a range. So here we have 50 web servers. In this file, you can also add custom parameters for each server if you need to. And then when it's time to run it or connect to, let's say, manage development servers and then production servers, you can define the servers in different files. And then you run Ansible with that host, inventory file. That way, you get the multi-stage environment, without really creating anything special. And then the playbooks looks like this. It's just a YAML file with the definition of which group of servers are going to be used in this playbook. So in this case, we're going to perform these operations on the web servers. We can define some variables, and then we have the list of tasks. In this case, we're just making sure Apache is installed. And then after Apache is restarted, after it's installed, we can make sure we restart Apache. So this is the way you define a playbook, the basic. And then you have the roles, which is just a collection of tasks that you can reuse. You can install roles that are shared by the community in a site called Galaxy. This is where you go and browse a collection of roles. There's thousands of them. So once you install that role, you just define it in the playbook. You can define a set of parameters or variables, and that's all you need to do to use it. Super simple. And then you execute the playbook with the Ansible playbook command. And then Ansible is going to start connecting to all the servers that you have there, performing each operation, giving you a status of it, and when it finishes, you know the deployment process completed. So there's a few roles for deploying Symfony applications. The first one, it's a role that I created when I was in Server Grove many years ago. I think we were one of the first using Ansible to deploy Symfony, so there were no roles available. So we created one that was covering the basic needs of just deploying a Symfony application. And then people from the community started sharing patches and fixes and improvements. So it changed quite a while over time. About, I don't know, a few years ago, I don't remember how long, some guys from Barcelona created Ansistrano, which is a set of playbooks to do what Capistrano was doing. And it's really, really cool, very flexible. I'm going to show you a little bit more about it. And then this guy, which I cannot pronounce his name, he created Ansistrano Symfony Deploy, which is another role that it is based on Ansistrano, but it's just for deploying Symfony applications. Because with Ansistrano, you can use it for any application. It's not just Symfony. So Ansistrano is basically two roles that you can install independently and use independently. If you go to the site, it has really good documentation. And there's something really nice about this, is that you can actually test your roles. So you can add testing. So you can, if you make a change to your process, and then you run it with Travis CI, for example, you can have testing of your role. This is really important, really good. And in fact, this morning I was on the site on Galaxy, and I noticed this role, Ansistrano, is being featured. So this means that there's a bunch of people using it, there's people like it, so this is good news. And congratulations for being featured. So you install it with Ansible Galaxy install, and then the name of the role. And once you have it installed, Ansistrano defines a workflow that is very important to understand. It basically separates the whole process into 5 areas. The setup is what creates that directory structure that we showed before. Update code is what it either runs Git or rsync or copies the files to the server. Then the symlink shared is what creates that symlink from the shared directories into the new release. And then we have the symlink step, which is the one that changes the current symlink to the new version. And then we have the cleanup step, which actually removes any old releases that we may have. And before and after each of these steps, we have hooks that we can use to perform custom operations that we may require. And this is how the Ansistrano Symfony Deploy role hooks into Ansistrano. And this is how you can extend what Ansistrano is doing. There's a ton of variables that Ansistrano has that lets you define the way it works. Basically, here we have the deploy from and to. These are directories that where we have our code and where it's going to end up in the servers. Then we have the current symlink, the way we are going to update the symlink, share paths, share files, etc. And then also Ansistrano allows you to deploy using different strategies. You can use rsync, which is going to copy the files from where Ansible is running, either your local computer or a build server, into the production server, the deployment servers. And you can also use HTTP GET, so you can download a tar file of your source code. So if you're using tags in Git, then they get compress into a tar file, then you can download that file. Or you can also use S3 to download files from S3. So there's different ways of how you can do this. These are some of the variables that you use with the different deployment strategies. And then at the bottom of this one, you can see one of the hooks, how you change the hooks in Ansistrano. So once you install Ansistrano, you create a playbook file with those variables that you need to change, and then you define the role, and then you just you can run it. In this case, we're going to run Ansible to all hosts in the inventory file, and then we define some variables, role, and then we run it like that, simple. And once you run it and it finishes, in the remote server, you're going to get that directory structure that we talked about. Now, if you need to do a rollback, what you need to do is create another playbook with just one variable, which is where Ansistrano is going to find the deployment. And then we define we set the rollback role. And then we just run it. And that takes care of the rolling back to a previous version. So the way you add hooks is that in your playbook, you change the variable like this. You specify a YAML file in the Ansible configuration. And then in that playbook, you can, for example, restart PHP FPM if you need to. You can also use this to generate a local YAML configuration in Symfony. You can copy it from the server, the build server to the live server, or you can use the template module that allows you to render a template on the server with some variables that you define in the Ansible configuration. This way, you don't have to add passwords in Git. You need to avoid that. So this is a good way of generating files on the server without actually having that content in Git. So Ansistrano Symfony deploy, as I said, is another role that uses Ansistrano. Basically, you can install it again with Ansible Galaxy, and this will install the dependencies it needs, like Ansistrano if you didn't install it before. And then this one also provides a set of variables to deploy a Symfony application. For example, the environment of Symfony that we're going to be using, if we're going to use Composer to update our dependencies, if we want to install assets, run ascetic. Migrations by default are not enabled because, think about it, when you're deploying to multiple servers, you don't want to run the migrations in each server because Ansible by default is going to run all these commands in each server. So you want to avoid running migrations in each server. So in the role side, there's some instructions on how to run this part only on one server when you're deploying. But by default, it's disabled. And yeah, that's it. And then you have your playbook where you define those variables. In this case, we're going to deploy to all servers. Then we define the variables for Ansistrano. And then we just say, OK, we want to use this role. And that's going to take care of deploying our Symfony application. We run it like any other playbook. Another tool that I like to share every time I talk about this is FPM. In a lot of places, you want to package your application into an operating system package like deb package for Ubuntu or Debian, or an RPM package for Red Hat-based Linux, because this has a lot of advantages. You can define dependencies with packages. Like if you have a Symfony application that needs a specific version of PHP or specific PHP extensions, you can define all of those when you create the package. But for example, creating a package for Red Hat, if you use the common tools that come with Red Hat, it's a nightmare. You're going to spend hours and hours reading and trying, and it's not an enjoyable process. This guy created FPM, which is a wrapper around all those tools, and it's really, really simple to build a package using this command. Basically, you define the source where all the files are, you define the type of package, the name of your application, the version of your application, and then you get all the files from that directory. The same for Debian packages. In here, you can also add more parameters to define other dependencies like PHP, PHP extensions, etc. And you can also perform operations once the packages are installed. This way, you can then put these packages in a repository, and it can be installed in as many servers as you want. This is a great tool. And finally, I want to share a workflow that you should try to achieve. Basically, as a developer, you push changes to GitHub, for example. Then GitHub notifies Jenkins that there is a new version, a new push. And Jenkins is going to run your tests. Is going to create a tar file of your site or your application. Then it's going to deploy this application to QA servers so people can test and do integration testing, functional testing, etc. If everything goes well, Jenkins can notify Ansible, and it can start running your deployment process to update production. And then if everything goes well, you get notifications through email, Slack, or whatever. So this is what we want to achieve and complete the whole automation that we are talking about. So remember, if you learn anything in this talk, please, it's about automation and no human intervention. If you have any doubt, we can go back to that command that deletes all the files on the server, and that's going to give you nightmares. So that's pretty much what I have today. I think there's some time for questions. If you guys have any questions, feel free to do them now, or later on you can catch me in the hallway. And thank you very much.
Hola.
Hello.
Hi.
So I suppose Ansible does everything in parallel, right? So
Yes.
if you have 20 servers, it will deploy on 20 servers in parallel. How do you handle if on one server something goes wrong? So like automated rollback, or can you handle at all because everything is in parallel?
That's configurable. You can change the way it works if you want to avoid updating in general, or you can just keep going. And also, in the playbooks, you can define a task that, for example, whenever one server is being updated, you can, let's say you have a load balancer, you can remove that server from the load balancer and then add it back whenever the process completed successfully. So you could have servers that didn't complete, and then they don't get put back into the load balancer. So that's really up to you how you want to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have a control. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.